Hey everyone, DPK here, back for a second quick hit for the day. Just going to talk about Strikeforce. Their card for this weekend, supposed to go off on the 29th with Gilbert Melendez fighting Pat Healy. Um, Canceled last night. This is Gilbert Melendez suffered an injury and had to pull out, so the Showtime came in, said we're not going to show the rest of this card. It's not anything we want anything to do with, which understandable when you look. There wasn't a ton else on this card, and Strikeforce Zuffa decided, okay, we got to pull the plug on this without the Showtime money coming in, and uh, and they canceled it. This makes the second show in the last month that Zuffa's had to cancel in the last 10 days. Of course, the other one was UFC 151 with the whole Dan Henderson's knee injury, John Jones, Chael Sonnen, all of that. Um, and that fell through, and then they canceled it now. And when you really look at it very close, you see that four cards this year. You have this 151. Then the original UFC 145 was supposed to be in Montreal back in March, and then they couldn't get a headline lined up for that, so they bumped it about 6 weeks out. They made UFC 145 come down to Atlanta. You know, it had a card in Atlanta with, I want to say there was 8 or 9 Canadian fighters on it. So you just think about that for a little while, and then they had a show set up for September 7th, which was an FX show, and that fell through pretty rapidly. And now, you know, that only had one fight announced for it before it got moved. So I mean, Zuffa's been taking it right on the chin, and I think what is really starting to get exposed here is just how badly Zuffa has bungled and screwed up this whole acquisition acquisition of Strikeforce. I can, it's one of those moments. I'm a diehard MMA fan. I can tell you where I was when I found out. I was sitting in a freaking subway after I'd been skydiving all morning in freaking West Point, Virginia, and all of a sudden I pull out my phone and open it to check Bloody Elbow, and hell, there's this article. The whole way home, I was freaking going nuts thinking about all these potential matchups. I mean, just a few run through my head. Think about this at the time, almost a year and a half ago now, since this news came up. I want to say it was March or April in 2011. But I mean, you're thinking Melendez versus Edgar. King Mo versus Rampage. They'd been going back and forth at it already. Uh, Diaz versus GSP. Fiajao coming over. Rafael Cavalcante. Tyron Woodley coming over. Gregor Musasi coming over. These were the guys that people were talking about. And Jacare coming over and getting into the middleweight division with his submissions and his stand up had been looking better. Tim Kennedy at the time. Was just looking at all these guys flooding into UFC. I think we all knew it wouldn't be immediately, but it's crossover fights. These guys maybe come over for one or two, and then UFC got into the contract negotiations, and it became pretty clear they sacrificed these guys. I mean, they bought Strikeforce to keep it on Showtime and to block Bellator from getting over and getting onto Showtime. They did not want the competition on Showtime, and they wanted a little bit of leverage that, I think when they were negotiating their own TV deal, that Showtime could be an option. And now they are paying the price for that with all these weak cards, these injuries falling through. Let's take a look at it. I mean, if UFC didn't get crushed by injuries this summer, we probably wouldn't be talking about this. If everything had gone off as planned, if UFC 147 really had Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen and Wanderlei Silva versus Vitor Belfort in a soccer stadium in Brazil, that would have been a 1 million buy pay-per-view. Then UFC 148 was, man, let's see, I'm trying to remember the original. It had Faber versus Cruz. You had, oh, man, there were more good fights. Rich Franklin, Kung Lee was on there. Um, that was a pretty stacked card as well. Before that got started getting picked away and taken out behind the woodshed. Then you had 149, which looked absolutely loaded. You had Big Nog on it. You had Jose Aldo defending his title. You had Shogun was fighting on that card. 149 was just another stacked event, and Bisbing was on 149. Then he got hurt. You know, if all these injuries hadn't just ripped apart the UFC roster this summer, then I mean, it would have been a huge summer and nobody would even care. I mean, if one if 151 had still fallen through, but the reality is that all these injuries happen. They're happening everywhere right now, and it's tearing apart, and it's showing how bad UFC just screwed this up because they have talented fighters. They have them sitting over in Strikeforce, and they're being underutilized. These guys are fighting once or twice a year, and they're not even fighting guys that are of the same quality. Luke Rockhold's fighting Keith freaking Jardine. Luke Rockhold's a top 10 middleweight. Some people think he's a top five middleweight. This guy should be fighting Chris Weidman. This guy should be fighting Tim Bosch. This guy Michael Bisping. St. Jacare should be fighting that same group. He should be fighting the Alan Belchers. Tim Kennedy should be in fighting Jake Shields, Costa Philippou type fighters, not Trevor Smith. In a few months. I mean, Daniel Cormier should already be over here, but it was never about the talent grab. That's what the fans wanted to see. But Zuffa was looking at it from just a business perspective, and they bungled it. And now you look at these fighters, just guys are sitting over there being held hostage. Their careers, not everybody, not all these guys have long careers in front of them still. You got Gilbert Melendez, Luke Rockhold, Jacare, Musasi, Lorenz Larkin's a young guy coming on the scene. Um, uh, Kennedy, Tim Kennedy, this is a guy who probably could be a few fights away from going back in the active duty army, or he has a lot of options in his life. You got Josh Thompson, Daniel Cormier, Nate Marquardt, Tyron Woodley. All these guys just over there essentially feeling like they're wasting away and they're not serving a purpose. I mean, hell, you could bring the women's 135. That division is ready. I mean, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later this week. But gosh, I mean, you could so beef up these UFC cards and make the quality so much better. I mean, they're stuck in this contract that they did, which solely I have to think was solely blocking Bellator and maybe just a little bit to keep their options open. But you know what? Dana Showtime said they didn't want him involved, and now he's out in the cold, and Showtime looks like a shitty product. I mean, I can't imagine too many more people are buying Showtime now or keeping their Showtime subscription when that money comes due just to say, oh yes, I can watch Strikeforce. You know what? People are gonna start going to the bars or finding it online the next day to tell you the truth. It's hard to justify that cost when they're doing 5, 6, 7 shows a year, and some of the shows aren't even that good, and the fighters you're not that much interested in. So I really hope Dana White, Lorenzo, and Sean Shelby, these guys who work hard in dealing with Showtime and Strikeforce. I hope they find a way to figure this out and just kill Strikeforce and get the talent over to UFC. The UFC pay-per-views need it. The UFC's on Fox need it. I mean, this just kind of needs to happen. They need the what's left of the star power over there, and they need the quality fighters over there to beef up their own product, their main product. UFC is what made the Fertitas and what made Dana White. I mean, they can't go around holding this stuff in their back pocket when they need it right now. So That's just my thoughts on Strikeforce. I hope this card is really their affliction moment where they just die off and go away, and the assets, come over to UFC. Let's hope that's what happens. But that's all I got on this, guys. There's still fights this weekend. You got UFC on Fuel, so everybody enjoy those. I'll talk to you later.